I'm personally inspired. Anyone in the audience inspired? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Great. How excited was it to see early 80s Chicago? Just the backdrop. You're like, I remember that. I remember that. Okay. Well, one, I want to thank you for coming out today, allowing us to watch your projects. Does anyone here in the audience remember seeing this when it came out originally? No? Okay, okay. Yeah, so this is exciting to be able to showcase it, and I think you can probably just garner from the enthusiasm here in the room that this project stands the test of time. And that while you were probably, looking to just share, stories about the culture, that the stories that you put together, in many cases, it was the first time that many people were even introduced to these works. So can you just tell us a little bit just about how you came up with the idea for the project?
At the time, and I do want to give a shout out to someone who's in the film, Mr. Billy Branch. And then we have two Grammy-winning people. We have Brother Bell, Lurie Bell, who's the children at the end were his little brothers.
Lurie was in there.
Was he in it? I asked you if you were one of the kids. So we had two people in that. At any rate,
They were the cat folks.
at the time, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is the funding and the administrative side of PBS. Actually, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is actually the network, the distributor, and then PBS, is the administration end of two institutions, and they came together, and by some miracle, I don't understand, they put together a grant for a project that featured the Black Cultural Project, and then they invited proposals for it. And they did not invite the general public. This was kind of kept within the system, but they were required by law to allow anybody who wanted to apply. So a friend of mine who was working within the system said, well, you need to see this and apply. And I had started, I had a production company which was very small and very young at the time. We were feeling our way along. We didn't have anything else to go by. You know what I mean? We just, you know how you make a trail, you're the one with the machete trying to cut through the stuff, so that people can come, and you have no idea what kind of bugaboo is sitting in front of you, So that was the situation, and I decided that we should apply for that. And at the time, I didn't have any credibility at that level, because we're talking about doing professional level work that they could, they could televise. I had a background in television. I had been working, I worked at 2 television stations, and I had been making films, but this was a big project. So we had to make it attractive. And it occurred to me that, that we could do 7 different aspects of recent African-American cultural history. And we could make it come alive in 2 ways. One, by featuring people who were actually experienced it. It's one thing to read about the Cotton Club and you hear about it in terms of, the European audiences who were the guests. But you don't know about it. You don't know about what the people actually performed there felt. So it was to make these things come alive with people who had experienced whatever it was. So when we talk about the blues, you have somebody who's a blues person. We did an episode on the Black West, and we went out to Yuma, Arizona, and Colorado, and we had people who lived that life, and they were elders, so they had actually really experienced these things. And they're all wonderful, as you could see by these two. And so the idea was to do very intimate, talks with them to get their information. And then the second part of making it come to life was that we went on location and we did dramatic reenactments, and we really used the medium. That's the other thing I wanted to do, was to make them films, really films. And to create kind of a different animal that's documentary in the sense that it's information giving, but definitely has dramatic elements. So you kind of get the whole thing. If you're going to do a music film, you got to have music. So that was the concept. And then neither I nor my company had the credibility to be competitive at that level. So I pulled together people who were recognizable in the industry and who had credentials, and they signed on to it in various as directors and various capacities. And we put this proposal together. And the review committee actually gave us the money. It was $1 million grant. And yeah, who ever heard of it? And that would be even more today. It'd be a lot, maybe twice that today. And the review, the two institutions, PBS was so shocked that they gave the money to us. And then when we got the message that we had the grant, we bought champagne, we danced around the office. Nobody could see. So then the call came up, it was like, excuse me, we rethought this. So it's like, uh-oh, we got to record the champagne, stop the dancing, everybody. And they said to us, well, we kind of decided that we want you to do a pilot program, where you do an episode so they can check it out. And I thought, well, we can do that. I mean, we can do one of the episodes. They said, oh, and by the way, there are going to be 2 other pilots. So we're back in competition. They kind of did not want to do this. So we made a pilot. We did the episode on, I think it was the folklore episode. And this one has to do with African American folklore and its power and its significance. And we had a wonderful gentleman who had heard the rabbit stories from a man who'd been a slave when he was a boy. So he had them, everything was firsthand, We animated some of the stories and as part of the film. And we went out and shot that on location. Went fishing with 2 elder gentlemen that told stories to each other, all of that. So then they reconvened the panel, and the panel said, give them the money. So we beat it the second time. And when the check came, when the first check to start thing came, we Xeroxed it. We pulled the check back, we Xeroxed the check. I still have the Xerox. I've never seen a check that big in my whole actual life. Now, it wasn't addressed to me. You do understand that. It was not signed to me, to the company. But it was funny.
Okay, so what is it like looking at this project now? Or let me ask you this before you say that. When was the last time you watched it from beginning to end?
Well, I pulled them out recently for, I know them very well because in the years since we did them, at that time, there was a lot of being on the road and screening them. And of course, they were aired nationally, so people saw them all, and over several years. Over, I think, 2 years. They had the right to show them over 4 years, but they did run the series 2 years. We had a big fuss about the timing, and that's a whole other conversation. But they aired, so that generated a fair amount of attention, so I did. But to answer your question, I just recently was invited to a film festival in Cincinnati, and I, pulled them back out and looked at them, have them around. And the idea was to make the subject matter, of course, is timeless. And as Michael said, there were a lot of these films are about things that people in general, because they're for a general audience, either didn't know about or certainly didn't know about in any depth or any detail, and definitely didn't know about in terms of the memories of someone of the real deal people,
And why was that something that you valued, finding people who had actually been there? Because a lot of times you watch these documentaries and you do have, scholars and experts, and all of which is fantastic because they give a context, but you found people who were actually there. And why did you feel that that was significant?
Because this is life, and this is alive, and this is ours, and this is us. And this is the way, this is the griot tradition. Everything, we pass down information and experience and love and all of that from generation to generation. So it was trying to do that, but on a national level, So all these people are your grandparents. And I don't care what, I'm not talking about your ethnicity. They're your grandparents, And it was, I really feel that our strength and what has kept us here has been our love for each other. And we need to hold on to that and grab it back these days. And I'm expecting that to start with everybody that's in here. And that all and it begins with self-love, which we're being taught not to have. The next time you get your mouth ready to say this, or you hear somebody say, well, we don't do that, or black people don't blah, 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 when it's kind of a put down, think about it, kind of check that. We don't do that. We don't care about each other. We don't do that. If that were true, nobody in here would be here. Because from the time of the enslavement, it's only that's kept us here. That's our strength. That's our food. Except we care about each other.
And it seems like it's the project, I think, is so magical in part because it seems like it comes from a space of love and a real appreciation for the community. And oftentimes, you see projects where there's an exploration of the culture, but it's kind of told from this dystopian perspective, or this perspective of an ongoing struggle where there is no celebration. It's not told from the standpoint of resilience, right? And so what was special about the project that you put together was that it highlighted that resilience without having to contextualize it in a certain pain that's insurmountable, right? And it was great because, so we had an opportunity to speak earlier, which was amazing, and I'm totally touched by it. But there was something that you said, which you also just shared, that I thought was really pivotal, in that you talked about growing up in an environment where the community, and more specifically just your image of being a person of African descent, was one that was, I don't want to just say positive, but enriched. And so there wasn't this idea of looking at yourself from an outsider's perspective, right? Yeah. And when you go into, as a person who works in media, one of the reasons, well, I'll speak for myself, I'm not going to generalize, but one of the reasons I went into media was because at an early age I realized that people see themselves through other images. It's almost as if individuals can't articulate who they are without someone else feeding it back to them. And so one of the opportunities as a a person of color who jumps into this realm is to try to help people see their own humanity and to value that. And so, but I would like you to speak just a bit about that and just the idea of growing up in a space where it was very enriched and then stepping out to do this work and then suddenly realizing, oh, wait a second, you know, there's something else going on here.
Yes, unfortunately, film and television, which at that time I was growing up was just, well, television came along. Now, you know, these were entertainments, but they were entertainments over here somewhere. You went out and you kind of did that. And now, you know, it's like there's this constant drip of that stuff into us. And the industry has changed in the sense that they don't sell entertainment, they sell tickets. The money is made in film through ticket sales. And it doesn't matter whether you like the film or not, you can walk out, but once they've got that money, so it's a gazillion-dollar industry, and the television, the money in television is made by selling commercial time. So the more people you can get to watch, you know, that's how the money is made. And you get the most people to watch by the lowest common denominator. So we're going to give you the minimum to get everybody to watch. And that's how money's made. So, and it's become a babysitter for your children. We are all educated by that, whether we know it or not, you know. And by our presence and our absence, we're influenced by it. And that's it's painful to me because I did come from, I'm from Tuskegee, Alabama, Tuskegee Institute. And we had a really strong black community that was like an oasis in the middle of the very ugly South. The Tuskegee Institute people were, you know, connected to the school, and we were kind of raised, we children were raised tribal. And that, you know, there are a number of people who, that some of them you know about. Lionel Richie's one of them, Kathleen Neal Cleaver. And it's kind of amusing to us that people have these names because this is just another bunch of little folks, you know. Everybody's parents had spanking rights, you know. and Lionel's mother was the 5th grade teacher. My mother taught everybody in, you know, at the high school where everyone went. And we had, and it's a rural community, and there wasn't really any serious, there certainly wasn't a serious division other than the obvious, you know, people's means. And between the black people who were associated with the Institute and the farm community. You know, my dad was the head of the Department of Agriculture, and as such, you know, my dad could plow with it behind a mule, you know. So, and we sang, I was telling Ytasha, we sang Lift Every Voice and Sing every morning in school. So, you know, when someone told me, oh, we have a black national anthem, oh, really, what is it? And they sang that, and I was like, oh, that, I mean, it was, you know. And we had a sense of who we were because it was in the milk, you know, with the Tuskegee Institute, you know, with Dr. Carver, and the airmen were the daddies of my generation. Some of them remained in Tuskegee, you know, raised their kids. Chappie James did, his kids were, you know. And, but none of that was noteworthy, it was just people. So we've grown now to the point where Tuskegee now has 8 traffic lights. And 4 of them are in the town square. The other 4 are somewhere out, you know. Yeah, I know where they all are. So, you know, but it was a sense of security, and when you looked at the other people, it was, you definitely didn't want to be like that. So it didn't occur to any of us that we ever wanted to be anybody but who we were. Even if you, and if you came from the poorest farm family, you had the example of the people at the Institute. You know, I'm not saying that we're not talking about a better or worse thing. I'm just saying you didn't need to be somebody else to know that you could achieve and that you do things. And the Institute was very open. And when anybody came to speak, anybody could go. You know, they had one of the 2 swimming pools, and anybody could go and swim from the community. So to the point where once in one occasion, the Ku Klux Klan, that they were able to terrorize farmers and people who worked for them because of people who were dependent on them. But they decided, they lost their minds and decided they were going to come through Tuskegee Institute. And the daddies said, come on. And they said, now, we want you to do this in the right way. We want you to come at night. We want you to come on horseback. We want you to have the flaming torch. We want you to wear your sheet. Because I can see that. You know, you can see that. And make sure you come by my house. And my dad and everybody else's dad, and you know, people got guns.
And then you had World War II vets, like,
right, I mean, you know,
highly trained individuals and some different stories.
And you know, everybody, my dad had 2 shots, you know, they had one beer and a shotgun, and their shotgun at the window. And they said, and if you make it past my house, we want you to ride down into the campus because we've got some kids, ROTC kids, and they've never had any practice. You know, she was at a movie. So yeah, you know.
I think we have another episode for the documentary.
So I say it's on, you know.
I thought they didn't come, did they?
No, are you kidding me? They're not crazy. I'm crazy.
Right, now that's amazing. And you know what's fascinating in looking at the project is that you're on location.
Right.
So you do the reenactments, which I have to thank you for because that really added context. Didn't that really help to see the actors bring it to life? But then also you're in the locations where these things were happening, which adds a whole new magic to telling the story. And you know, I'm kind of the mind that spaces kind of hold an energy and a life of their own, which can kind of speak to their histories and speak to their futures.
Yes.
And so can you just talk about just that experience of, say, being in Chicago with Willie Dixon, and you're in Chicago in the places where this music was being created?
Yes, because the experience was an experience for us too, clearly. I mean, the process was, you know, I had pre-interviews with everybody and research everybody. I knew what people were going to say. And of course we did much more extensive talks than what you see, but we didn't have to talk forever because we knew what people were, you know, we had already pre-interviewed them and I had that. And I had whatever they wanted to add, and so we could come in and then get it on film. But there was a lot of serendipity. There were a lot of gifts and wonderful things that happened that you just you just couldn't plan, you know. It was the one with Willie Dixon really was really exciting because when I came to Chicago, along with Gilbert, who directed that piece, to meet Willie Dixon and talk with him by phone, and he sounded good. I knew he could carry the film, and I knew enough about him and his music. But then I wanted to sit down and really talk to him. And when we went in to talk to him, he took us into his little studio, and the band was there. and as he talked, they played. He had them play. It was an incredible. You know, that was great. And then in the Black West one, the part that was on the rodeo, on the cowboy, we had a man named Frank Greenway who rode with Bill Pickett. So we're talking about black folks that do this stuff. And you got to see people on horseback, not actors, but people, ranchers, people who do this every day. And I had met Alex Dees, who with his family did the reenactments, and those things were with, you know, on his ranch. And he went to Yuma the first time, and he called his kids. It was like, you know, just his kids had come home from school. They were high school age teenagers, his two sons. And they were wearing those kids, you know, those kids sneakers. And he said to them, go get your horses. Like someone would say, go get your bike, or, you know, go, you know, and bring those around. So then we would go outside, and these kids come on their horses in their kids' sneakers, and he says he has them riding and roping and all this stuff. It was wonderful, you know. And that's what they do every day. And on the weekends, they do calf roping along with their buddies. That's like playing pinochle, you know. Yeah.
And that's like a total reminder for our researchers out there to have, you know, the experience, like just the personal experience of make sure, you know, you're not just talking to people on the phone, but you go to the actual spaces, which sounds a little silly to say now, yeah, but there are people, you know, very much
And it's a
digital.
privilege. I mean, yes, how are you gonna do, we're in our heads in a way that's not healthy. This whole business of people being experts on stuff, you know, because they read about it, go to the people that did it, that the people that read about it got it from, you know. And that's often somebody in your house. So I encourage people to talk to your elders, to your parents, to, you know, don't let people go. Almost everybody that was featured is gone now. And that's something that, you know, and of course you're having the experience. I mean, it was enriching for me, you know, you can imagine for those of us who worked on these projects, how incredible it was in our lives, you know, it really touched our lives. Just a constant reminder of who we are. And the more you do this, and I'm appreciative of being pulled out of my kind of semi-retirement, it's just, I want us to appreciate who we are. And that's not going to, and to your point about an outsider's perspective, you don't need someone else. You know, I mean, if I'm going to wait for the film and television industries to change before I can, you know, that isn't going to happen, you know, in my lifespan. So it's really about what ways do we use and do we find to, you know, to nurture each other. But first, we have to be in a place of self-love. And it has to come from inside. So, and from observing and getting out there and being friendly and talking to strangers and saying hello to people.
I know, isn't it funny that now we have to say, yeah, be sure to talk to people.
Yeah.
That would so love. Do we have time for questions?
yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, questions? In the back in the middle, you're pointing to someone? Oh, yes. Yes. She was holding you down.
Which one?
Yes.
I wanted to find out where can we see all of these Were You There, series. First of all, thank you so much for making it. I think it's great. This is the first time I've heard of it, and I'd like to see the rest of it. I was Googling and trying to figure out maybe some on YouTube, but I just.
No, we're not letting YouTube do this. No. One of the things is that, there's a whole question of rights, first of all, transferring to different media.
Because this was shot on film?
Shot on film.
Okay.
And then aired, and then transferred from film to professional size videotape, 1-inch videotape, and then they aired as videotapes. And now I think that I can get some people together and we can work on where we can find the money to make those transfers, because that has to come from somewhere.
Right, so you're just looking to digitize it, or...
Yes, and it's a quality thing, and then maybe to make the transfers from the film.
Right.
That has to happen at a professional house. We're not talking about just we're not talking about VHS.
And what
We're
also
not
is,
talking about DVD,
you actually have it on film, which makes it, or the higher quality
Right.
transfer than if you had shot it on, the beta tapes of the early 80s.
Right.
That would be more of a challenge.
Exactly. But there are places that do that, but it's expensive. And then you have the question, we have, there were, there's television rights to use most of the material, but for the music, to distribute in any other way, there's music that's owned in clips. So the clips are, they were cleared for a certain period of time and a certain use. And so, and some of that can add up. So that's all about figuring that out and getting grants and all
Well,
of that.
we're all behind you and cheering you on for that process.
Well, y'all got to give me that with some cash money
Let us know where to send it.
or some organizations that that can, to do that.
Yeah, because this stuff is too precious, and you got an eager audience out here that's excited for it. Another question.
Well, one thing I gotta say really brought back some memories, because that was 40 years ago? That was.
What?
What?
I don't know. I don't
What
think
year
about
was
that.
that? The Willie
I was 2.
No.
I don't know how old you were, but
What year was that?
1981.
Come on now.
Let's go.
Well, I'm an Afrofuturist, so an Afrofuturist, there's no time.
But-
There is no time to spend.
But, no,
But
what
make
year?
your point, Billy. No, I mean,
Okay, all right. But you still,
It went in the 80s, in the
It was in
early
the
80s, yes.
close to 40 years.
Yeah, we did that in 1980.
Yeah.
Stop saying that.
That's a good thing.
Right.
It's still here.
Yeah.
Okay. But, Carol, you retain the rights, you still have the rights to all of the segments.
Everything is copyrighted to DuSable Film.
So that you have ownership of that.
Has ownership of that.
So basically, if you wanted, so if you wanted to, once you got it transferred, let's say to a CD format, a DVD format, then you could distribute it, right?
But no, because we would have to get clearance for those things that were not original music. Willie Dixon's music, we have the rights to.
Right.
But there are clips, like in the Micheaux thing, that are owned,
Right.
and those are cleared for the broadcast.
Okay.
And for that period of time. So we would have to have clearances again. And some of the clips, and some of them were expensive. Like there's movie clips in some of the other ones. And that's like, I don't know, like a few $1,000s a minute. And it would be even more now, so yeah.
Right, but totally doable. One last
But yeah.
question. Yes, gentlemen.
First of all, I grew up signifying monkeys, sitting up
Yeah.
always lying to signify. My father, oh my goodness. But I want to touch the point about getting together again, like as a community. I have a website, and I've been talking about how they've taken the neighbor out of neighborhood
Right.
and just made it a hood,
Right.
hang out. And like you said, back in the day, in school, you got that, those rulers, 10 rulers strapped together. Everybody in the neighborhood, if I did something wrong.
Yeah, spanking rights.
Yeah, and then they spanked me, then my mama spanked me, and when we grew up, and like you said, we're still here. And I just want to ask a question, what do you think we can do to get people, like I said, to talk again as strangers? I talk to people and just randomness. What can we do as a community to get back to put the neighbor back in the neighborhood?
Well, and that's, I think I kind of spoke to that. You be you and do you. And if we each do that, because we only work within our own, as individuals within our own environment. At the end of one of the animations has, that we showed this afternoon, has a song, and it's sung by the folk singer Odetta. And it's called One Man's Hands. And it's for the one called Unity. And the line is, one man's hands can't break the prison down. Two men's hands can't break the prison down. But if 2 and 2 and 50 make a million, we'll see the day come around. And you're only, there's a sister who's, Jewel Diamond Taylor, who's a motivational speaker, and her mantra is, all you can do is all you can do, but all you can do is enough. And what I found that what I put out there is what I get back. And you try to, and it feels good. So we have children that we influence, we have friends, that we love them on, and we have family, and even the one that gets on your last nerve. We're all human, but we step outside. Meditation helps you chill out and make a distance so you can look at things, it's not as crazy making because you step aside or pray, whatever it is. I really think it's each one, teach one, each one support one. People have churches, that's our institution. That's the one institution where we could congregate. And that has been the source of our being together. There's a lot of love there. Just the basics, and then read and just know who we are. Just know who you are. That, I don't know if that makes sense. And then whatever it is that you do it with that. I don't mean you work out of your rocket scientist. If you're sweeping the floor, you can do that with where you're generating.
Give it your all.
Yeah, well, and
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of something that my mom said once, and I was telling her, someone was telling me, oh, there's no community and we need to build more community.
we own this, we
Right.
own that.
And then she said to me, I didn't really agree. Well, I didn't agree with the individual who's making the statement, right? But we were having two different experiences. And, you know, when I was sharing it with my mom, she said something pretty interesting. She said, either you're a community person or you're not. Meaning, either you feel a connection to the people in the space and you're actively building that connection because you know we're all human beings and there's a relative affinity, or you just don't feel that way. And then you see, you know, levels of separation everywhere. But you bring it with you as opposed to looking for it to just sort of morph into this thing around you, right? You have to actually feel there's an established connection. And then want to celebrate that. And celebrate it with a smile and with a,
That's
you know,
enough.
just a, that's
Oh,
an
you know.
acknowledgement that somebody walked past, you know, that's okay. So I know that you had something you wanted to share. As a wrap-up point. And just to know, I know some of you have questions, so you'll be available to answer a couple questions afterwards.
It's up to Michael.
Well, we're supposed to
Um,
leave.
Okay. Well, we'll ask nicely. We'll.
We could walk slowly to the
Yes,
door.
we'll walk very slowly.
You know, since we had talked about the work and craft and all of that, and that's what I was asked to talk about, I wrote for an article in a book about African-American women who are filmmakers.
That's how I found out about you.
Yeah.
Jacqueline's book.
Jackie Billow's book. And I wrote a statement about kind of what I want, and I wanted to read it to you because I don't think I can say it better. I work to say it. So maybe this will be helpful. I want my work to uplift and to give the lie to the lies. I want us to be able to speak our own words in our own voices. I want those of us who work in, who know the language of film and television to have access to the best tools of the trade. I want us to be able to distribute our work to the general public, unfettered by racist censorship that protects the status quo. And I want those who aspire to learn the craft to have the same opportunities that are available to any other would-be film, television, or video professional. So.